Emily, welcome to the Hurt Healing Podcast. It's a joy to have you in the studio in Sydney today.
It's a joy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited for the conversation that we're about to have. I'd love for you to share your journey with drinking and when it started and when you realised that your drinking had become a problem.
How far back do you want to go? Pretty far. I guess for me, I grew up in a family of drinkers. And a long line of alcoholism is through generations of my family. And so growing up, I always felt from a very young age very excited by the prospect of being able to drink, to the point, and I've written about this in, some personal reflections that I've done. Like, I remember being really young and there would be like a little bit of wine left in my like parents' glass, like on the dinner table, and I would like sneakily just like have that, like from a kid, from a very young age. And I think that's curiosity in part. But as I've, been in a program for long enough now, I kind of realized that there was signs all along the way. But I basically, like every teenager, from the age of about 13 or 14, started to drink, in secret, go into mum's gin cabinet, have friends over, and friends would vomit, and we'd all, all of that kind of stuff. What I recognize now back then is I didn't have an off switch. Like, it wasn't like, we've had enough now, let's go to bed. For me, it was like, if I had one drink, it would continue until I would pass out, cause a fight, be, whatever. Some drama would happen from the age of kind of 13 or 14. And then it would be the next day waking up feeling like I couldn't remember things, feeling like I knew something bad had happened, but I didn't quite know what. And then because I have the way my agency is, and I'm was a very good arguer, very good debater, I would somehow twist it that it was the other person's fault about how reckless and, terrible I was behaving, and would somehow get an apology from them to me for my behavior. And that was so confusing, right? Like and so I think that training in those younger years during that adolescence, and never really having to wear the chaos I was causing because of that skill set. It wasn't until I was about 19 and we're all drinking. Like, it was drinking culture. It was all about can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God. It was all about getting fucked up, right? Like, it was all about and Australia, like Britain and like many countries, have such a strong drinking culture. Like, get your resilience, you know what I mean? Like, have you earned your stripes? Or you can outdrink her or out. Like, it was all that. And when I really first noticed potentially, like I flirted with the idea that it might be that, was when I was about 19 and I had my first ever panic attack. Now, personally in my life, a lot of stuff was going on. My parents had a really messy divorce. I was very much a parentified child. I'd had like OCD from the time I was really young. So there was a lot of stuff going on that I just was impulsively reacting to, not knowing what it was. And at 19, I had a panic attack. And I mean, as I'm sure you know, and many of your listeners know, like when you first have a panic attack, the whole world changes, because I lost kind of an ability to trust my own body. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to control, like, where did it come from? And so I lived in a state of panic about having a panic for a long time. So that cycle began at around 19, that cycle of I'm anxious about anxiety, and all of that. And the only thing, and then I moved to London at 19, and the only thing that would make me feel less anxious was having a drink, right? And then that is where the drinking was already very bad. It was, but it was hidden behind the culture, being a teenager. And at around 19, that's when I started to really realize that I was dependent to quelch feelings of anxiety and doomsday and existentialism and depression and all of that stuff. And so, yeah, but it wasn't till 8 years after that it got really bad. But I would say around 19, that's when I started to self-medicate through booze.
And do you think in London you had, because I know that your acting career had sort of started in its early stages before, well, maybe not your career, but you had been acting and you had been in quite a structure up until the point that you came to London?
Well, I was always sort of, was always like a performer. I always loved performing, but kind of my desire to be seen a particular way, like growing up in the burbs of Brisbane, it really wasn't that cool to be a drama kid from where I was from. So I kind of stamped out those hopes and dreams and was kind of just very socially focused, very like going out all the time. And so those dreams of mine that I had as a child and even into early adolescence, like fear took hold of me and I kind of banished any creative outlet. And so when I moved to London, it was just a party. It was actually being in London and hitting a few rock bottoms there that made me realize what I truly wanted to pursue as a career. Yeah.
And do you think the lack of having an identity and a purpose in London exacerbated the drinking, or do you think it had already taken off back in Australia?
I think it exacerbated it. Definitely not having a purpose, because also when you travel to a different country and you live in a different country, I was there like nearly 3 years, it kind of doesn't feel, it's like a geographical, we can escape through a geographical like for so long, and then all the you think you're going to run away from who you were and, wherever you go, there you are kind of thing. But that gets distorted for a little bit, and so I was living in this world where I was working as a receptionist in this one of the top 20 law firms in London, and it was a wild experience, and I was traveling, working in Barcelona, working in Greece during the summer, then coming back to England. But I think definitely because I had that kind of quote unquote mini nervous breakdown before I left, it got exacerbated and I kind of felt I could get away with it because I wasn't living in a reality, so to speak. It was like this kind of, we're in London, we're traveling, we're all together. There's 13 of us in a 4-bedroom home. Like we're all getting fucked up. Like who gives a shit, So yeah, it kind of, my addiction really was having a good time there.
I so resonate with that feeling of you think when you go to another geographical destination that you're going to somehow leave your head behind.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first few days, you get that sort of, oh, wow, this is great. Yeah. I feel a bit free. It feels as though your brain's sort of loosening up. It's the neural pathways aren't as entrenched as they were.
Yeah.
I think particularly with something like OCD, when you're, very stuck in a rigid routine, yes. Sometimes that shift can be great, but then very, very quickly the habits start getting their claws in, and then slowly week 1, week 2, and then by week 3, you're suddenly like, okay, right, we're now back to where we were. And then it's managing it and not letting it get even worse from where it was when you left.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I often reflect on those times like in London, and it's not to say I didn't have some amazing times and make amazing friendships, but that opportunity to kind of reinvent yourself. And it reminds me of like that thing, like it's, and not to compare it, but it's almost like a sugar high. It's like it feels really good for now, and you can almost convince yourself that. I remember just going, oh, it's so weird I don't have that anxiety thing anymore. But it's like, well, you do, you just drunk all the time, I just didn't, but I didn't have the awareness. I didn't even know that I was trying to run away from my own thoughts. I was impulsively just doing what I thought I had to do to survive. And for a while, it worked. That's the thing about drinking and drugging. Like for a while it works. It does you feel better. And eventually, it all comes to get you. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird to have the awareness I have now and looking back at 19-year-old Emily who, was just trying to survive with the only means she knew how. It wasn't like go to therapy and like maybe join a program or like there was just none that didn't even enter. People thought after my nervous breakdown, there's something like I felt like a freak. I felt so much shame that I had crossed over into this weird, because there was no one around me who'd been honest about their experience of their internal world. So I felt very like shameful and therefore wanted to silence anything like that. So I just joined them, just kept joining in the distraction of party.
And what governed what was responsible for your decision to come back to Australia and to actually get help and to start your recovery process?
Well, it was lengthy. I think the first thing I remember, I was sitting, it was like at 2:00 in the afternoon. Because you have those memories of like, I can see it now. It was like 2:00 in the afternoon. I just had this guttural feeling of, what are you doing? What are you doing? You've been here 3 years. Like how have you progressed? Is anything, I was in a relationship and it wasn't a bad relationship. I was very toxic because of my drinking, because I had that whole Jekyll and Hyde personality. It's amazing that I still had friends. But I remember sitting there and thinking, what is it that you want for yourself? Like, what is it that you want? Because you can go on doing this for a long time. And I thought, what I really want to do is I want to perform. Like that's all I've ever wanted, is to be able to be an artist and to perform, to write, to act, to do all of that. And so impulsively, I was like, I'm out of here. I got to go. And then I went home to Australia, moved back in with my mum with £5 left to my name and a bit of debt, actually credit card debt. And just started the process of thinking that what would heal me was not giving up drinking at this point. It would be to focus everything into becoming an actor and to getting into acting school and getting successful there. And so I was 23 when I got into acting school, when I got back from London, did that, had a really great time, learned so much about what I wanted to do. And I drank throughout that whole thing. But because I had a passion, the drinking was still happening, but it had something now to contend with, So it was kind of like, it was both, because I had to get up at 8, I had to be for acting school. You got to be there from 9 till 5 every day, Monday to Friday. And then I would work on weekends. So I had this structure now. And so the drinking is still number one, but was in tandem with something else.
Mm-hmm.
So it lay dormant there for a while, and I made new friends and I was getting attention and people like, you're good at this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I am. I love this thing that I'm doing. So it was all that, it was like that outside in feeling validation again, just replacing, any internal work that I had to look at or do. And I was just riding on that surface level validation. And it wasn't until I gave up drinking post acting school, post doing some theatre shows, post getting work. And it got worse when I first moved to Sydney, because I'd finished acting school, I'd done some professional gigs, and then I was like, well, this is it. The next thing, I'll be in a movie soon. And that's the alcoholic thinking. It's just like either grandiosity and covered by low self-worth, and going, well, this is the arrogance that came with that. Like, well, now that I've done all the things, I've been to the act school, I've got the profession, now I'll move to Sydney from Brisbane and I'm just going to fly high. And it was the opposite. It was the absolute opposite. Like ended up working in a donut shop, which I'm very happy to work. It wasn't about that, but it didn't turn out how I thought. And there was no work coming in. There was auditions, so much rejection. And that's when I started drinking a lot alone. That's when the depression hit. That's when I stopped going out. That's when I became very insular. And I would leave the donut shop that I worked at and I'd be like, please don't go. Please, like, don't do it. Like, don't pick up the bottles of wine. Don't do it. Just don't do it today. And of course, every day I would. And I was like, fuck, this is probably something. But again, I couldn't fully admit it to myself. I still thought it was the world's problem. Like, the world's not giving me what I want, therefore this is okay, And there's just a deep self-hatred really became realized around that time. Like, I remember just so many nights drinking on my own and looking at myself in the mirror and being like, I hate you. I hate you. And I was like, this isn't normal. Like, why do I have these such big feelings about myself? And then I moved back to Brisbane for a little bit, and I was in a relationship at the time, and then just one fatal night of a lot of booze, and me just being out of control and going back to my mum's place and leaving because we were living together, and then I left and I was like, I'm out of here. My whole thing was always, I'm leaving. You know, it was always that, I'm leaving, you better chase me because I'm leaving. All those games to try and test people to get love. You know, I'll push and push and push, and will you show up? Will you show up for me? All that, you know, I was so in that game, and rocked up at my mum's house, and I was blackout drunk, and I woke up at my mum's and I had kind of an epiphany that morning, and that was the last time I had a drink.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think you allude to so many really interesting points. I think the grandiosity of being an addict is something that is really hard, and it's that 0 to 100 mindset. There's no room for mediocrity. It's that sort of all or nothing. Yeah. It's like, I'm either going to be a superstar or I'm no one. And you get one good gig and then you suddenly think, right, okay, I'm going to be the next Taylor Swift or whatever. Yes. And it's really hard because I think our heads, and also then we grapple with the feelings of really low self-worth if we don't become the next Taylor Swift. Correct. We're complete failures, and therefore then the addiction gets its claws in, and then you just retreat to that. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, the unpredictability of life is something that addiction, again, is vying for the spotlight with, because it gives you that predictability. It gives you the certainty. You know the outcome. You know that if you have a drink, like, you'll go into that slightly comatose state and you won't feel the anxiety. Correct. And it's our behaviors in any regard, whether it's food, exercise, drinking, drugs, they're numbing tools. And I'm really battling with this at the moment because, I haven't felt, my addiction of choice is more, of choice, I say that.
Like it's not a choice.
Totally. Food and exercise are my areas my problematic areas. And it's really, really hard when you're in that state of limbo. Like you said, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you hate what you do sometimes. And you're like, why? I know why I'm doing this, but I can't quite put it down and I can't quite stop.
That's right.
And so what do you think was responsible for you just being able to, gave you the courage to say, stop, enough?
Well, it's so interesting because a couple of things happened. So that morning, and this is the thing, it's like a superpower and it's also not a superpower. It's also very damaging. I cared so much what people thought of me. I care so much still now, different, but so much still. And I could feel around that time that everyone started to pull away from me. I was really distracted. I was ruining family Christmases. I was ruining friendships. I was, my relationship was chaotic. Like, I could feel this energy pull away from me. That was one thing. I also had, and it sounds hippy dippy and whatever, it's just true. I had this weird dream. I was like half at my mum's house that morning, half comatose, half not, kind of coming in and out. And I had this dream. It was like a film of like a woman by herself, and there's like a terracotta mug and there's wine in it, and you zoom out, and there's cat hair all over this older woman with grey hair, and you zoom out and she's talking and laughing and talking about the days of the theatre, and you zoom out and you realise she's talking to nobody, right? She's there. She's gone mad. She's on her own. And it was me as an older woman. And I woke up out of the sleep and that was it. Now I wish it was just that, and now I'm living a great life and there's no issues, right? That day, that stopped me from having a drink that next day, and it stopped me from having a drink the next day and the next day. But what had happened is my addiction didn't go away. I thought it did. I was like, I don't drink anymore. Everyone likes me again. I'm sorted. But my addiction, because the addiction is in between your head. It's not what you do. It's in here and in here, right? And I went immediately, what replaced that was food, exercise. I became obsessive. I started eating, and because when you're a drinker and you stop drinking, you lose weight naturally because you're not drinking, heaps of beers or whatever. And you're not eating shit food because you're not hungover anymore or whatever. And so I started to lose weight just naturally. I lost like a bloat around my face. I was also getting older as a woman, when you lose your puppy fat and whatever. But people were like, you look great. look at you, you've lost weight, blah, 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 blah. And that was it. And my addiction was like, that's what we're doing now. And it got down to that was my whole thing. The obsessive thoughts about getting the next drink and what am I going to do to quell it became what have you eaten today? Go through the loop, go through the story. What did you eat this morning? How much exercise did you do? And it started slowly, right? It started like, I'm doing yoga once a day now. Now it's like, I'm doing yoga and I'm going to do a little weight session. Now I'm doing yoga and I'm only going to have one breakfast wrap all day. And I'm going to like the fact that when I feel hungry, it's a sign that I'm shrinking and that we're going to try and enjoy that pain. And that happened really quickly behind my own back, right? Like, I didn't realize, because I thought it was a good thing. I was like, and around that time I'd gotten Home and Away. I was working as an actress on TV, right? So I'm doing bikini scenes. So it was like perfect time to have an eating disorder, like perfect, right? Like but it was the alcoholism and the addiction just finding another route to exist. And I didn't know that. I thought I was cured because I wasn't drinking anymore, but I was weighing my food. I was having, I was and if I couldn't get a run in because the day was too long or I couldn't exercise, like I'd be like, I would be so anxious. I would be so terrified. I became terrified of putting on weight. I became terrified. Like I really then became the identity, and people would comment and be like, you've got the best body on the show. Look at your six pack. You're the da-da-da. And I was like, well, that's who I am now. I'm that. And, and then I remember, and I don't think I've shared this in the meeting, but I remember it was because I'd been sober and again, I wasn't working a program at this point. I didn't think I was an addict anymore. That's the truth. Right. And you're on the show for kind of 6 months before you go to air. Mm-hmm. And I remember the day before, and I'd had bouts of binging and purging when I was in my alcoholism, like very briefly. I'd do it and friends would do it and like whatever. And it wasn't a solidified thing, but I would do it. And I remember, it was the night before my first episode went to air. And I ate everything in the house, like everything. And I just spent all night vomiting in the toilet, all night, and it was just, again, it's that thing where I was like, what is going on? What is going on with me? Like I did all the things. I gave up the drink. I was a good girl. I became a good girl. I did all the things. Like what is happening to me? Why am I doing this to myself? So yeah, it's really confusing. It's a really confusing thing to have a mind and like ours, right? Like it's scary, it's confusing, and it just takes different routes. And then you kind of start to look at that, but that's still a big thing. Exercise became a big thing. I did start to eat more eventually as it kind of calmed down, as I kind of got on air and I sort of knew the landscape and I was kind of happy with my size-ish. But, there was still days where it was just like, got to go 3 hours at the gym or it was relentless. And I think in part that was almost more painful than the drinking because I was never present. I was constantly thinking about what I didn't do, how much I ate. Like it's your whole day. It's your whole fucking day. And then from there it's just crazy. And then I kind of got into a codependent relationship, and a great relationship, like a relationship that I don't poo-poo and I'm not ungrateful for. Like I learned so much about myself through that, but I made that person my higher power. Like that person became everything. And so it was just these series of events of me thinking I got rid of an addiction, thinking that I got rid of any OCD, which I also still, I sound like a basket case, but it's all the same thing, right? It's all just unprocessed pain. Mm-hmm. It's all just unprocessed neural pathways. I had a breakdown sober, relatively seemingly physically healthy. All my ducks were in a row. I was in love with someone and And I'd never, ever been more unhappy in my life, ever. And I didn't know why. I was like, but I did it. I did it. I got on the show. I made my family happy. I stopped the drinking. I did all the things. People like me. People respect me. And I am fucked. I'm fucked.
Yeah, that's a deep-rooted self-hatred, which
Isn't
is
it?
really at the root of the problem. And it is so, so hard to grapple with and to ignite that feeling of self-worth and to think that actually people will like me without all these behaviors. Because as you say, it becomes your identity being the skinny one on the show with the six-pack and being the one that's always exercising. And people have that expectation, oh, well, she'll be off and that exacerbates the issue, because I contend with that too. Oh, Pandora, she'll be off swimming and she'll be off hiking, and oh, you'll want to do your routine, won't you? And there's a part of me that's like, no, please stop me. Just stop me. Because I need your help, and I need, come and please have a smoothie with me. Don't say, oh, it's fine, don't worry, we'll do it another time, because I'm relying on you showing up. And as you said, you become aware of the codependency later on. But I think certainly in the early days, my mum was my absolute, she was there to give me permission. If she didn't give me permission, and I suspect maybe with your relationship, that person becomes the gateway to freedom. And if they're not there and they don't show up and they don't do the right thing, then the vitriol and the anger targeted at them is also quite an extreme emotion to contend with in your head. And then your friends always disappoint you because people are flaky and unreliable. And suddenly if someone can be your best friend and then 3 times in a row they cancel on you, or they do something that disrupts what you had in mind.
Correct.
And it's a massive blow.
It's a massive blow. And it is so interesting, isn't it? It's like I just made everything outside of me my higher power, tell me who I am. Can you tell me who I am? Can you tell me who I am? Because I've got no fucking idea. I've got no idea. I know I can people please. I know I can be here. I know I've got some skills. I know that, but there's nothing solid. It doesn't feel like there's anything solidified underneath. It's all just, I'm so breakable, and I want to appear so not breakable. So I want to appear, even in my relationship, I would appear dominant. You would have no idea that I was the one who was needing that more than they needed it, because I didn't let them know that I was completely vulnerable to them. My vulnerability looks like staunch and like I'm going to test you and I'm going to make you feel like I've got one foot out the door. I'm never fucking going anywhere. But, all those games, all just never aligning how I feel and what I think with what I'm doing. That's just always getting lost because the thing underneath, the deep self-hatred, the deep low self-worth, and is kind of all your decisions become based on fear. Everything becomes based on just getting to the next moment. Like if I do this, then I'll be okay there. I was never making decisions based on love and feeling warm. I was kind of just going, as long as I doesn't feel like this, then I'll just do that. And that just perpetuates old cycles of behavior, right? You're just doing the same pattern because it's known, as you said. It's just known. I don't know how to love myself. Like, what do you mean? Like, how would I even do that?
No. And I think when the rigidity of the behaviors becomes so ingrained in your brain, as you said, and the neural pathways go into that fight or flight mode, you are constantly operating out of fear. It's literally like, I'm going to die unless I do X, Y, and Z, particularly with the food and the exercise.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think people who don't have issues around food and exercise underestimate actually the extent to which the thoughts are just, like millions a day. Oh, that just,
it dictates your whole day, and it's because you have the thoughts, and then you become aware of the thoughts, and it's almost when you're attached to the thoughts before you really before I knew I could really had a problem with the food, and that took people around me. Like I remember someone took me to a pasta restaurant when I was in the middle of this food thing, and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna have a pasta." I was like, "Oh, there's no." Like, I won't be eating that. Like, I'll just get the salad. And she was like, are you serious? Like, what do you mean? And then and they were like, have the pasta. And I was like, oh my God, I can't actually have it. Like, I you have those moments of what is going, like you have clarity for a second. And I was like, no, I can't have it. And I just burst into tears. And they were like, something's going on here. Can you see that? And I was like, right now I can see it, but every day I can't see it. I can't see it. And then you become aware of the thoughts, and then you arrow yourself because then you're frustrated that you're having them, right?
Mm.
So there's so many things going on at once, and you're just in it, you're in it. And you just think, like, how on it, like, will it ever stop? Does it ever stop? Does it ever, like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? You know?
So tell us, what did you do?
What did I do? I had a nervous breakdown. I stopped being able to sleep.
So we're now in your early 30s.
Yeah, I'm in my early 30s. I'm in this relationship. I'm working a lot. I'm people pleasing a lot. I'm, and I'm exercising a lot, and I'm doing all those things. I'm not drinking though, so I must be fine. Right. And then my central nervous system just shut itself, and I couldn't sleep. All this cortisol was running through my body. I didn't sleep I didn't get a good night's sleep, I don't think, for 6 months. And it was so terrifying because I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't sleep. I was having repetitive thoughts, looping thoughts, just about wanting to die, and like an OCD strand. It's like my OCD, which I had throughout, like I like odd numbers. I don't like even numbers. I have to do the light 3 times a night. Still, like, I still have these remnants of OCD. It's so much better than it was. But that was, I had that since a kid, but all of that kind of heightened. And then it almost felt like the externalization of OCD became in my mind, and just, I couldn't like let go of particular images or particular thoughts, very much like intrusive thought syndrome. It kind of felt like it had tipped, just my whole system was shut itself. It just shut itself. And I couldn't sleep. And when you don't sleep, you feel even crazier. And I was seeing a therapist at the time because I was always in and out of therapy. And she was like, "Did you ever work a program when you stopped drinking?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, I feel like you need to maybe look into that." And so I was so desperate, and I was like, I'll do anything because, whatever. And so I started, getting amongst 12-step program, and I just had to try something new, because what I knew for sure was that what I was doing and the way I was thinking, I was like I didn't know how long I'd be around for. Like I was like, I have to admit, and that's the part of surrender, isn't it? It's like, what I'm doing, I know for sure isn't working. For sure, this isn't working. And so how do I, and I guess that's the gift, right? Like, that's the gift of desperation, the gift of a breakdown, like the gift of it all, is that I was like, I've got to stop thinking I know. I've got to stop trying to control. And like, my head's going to bother me all the way to the bank, but my head's bothering me anyway. Mm-hmm. So I might as well try something different. I might as well try and look at things differently. I might as well try and surrender to something great. I might as well try and hang around people who have minds like me, like, and that was the beginning of a different leaf, but it wasn't instant. I'd go and attend meetings, and I'd do all of that, and it wasn't slowing down, but I just kept going. I kept going to therapy. I did that whole sit in an ice bath. Like, I'm just going to sit in an ice bath. I threw everything at my recovery, but the kitchen sink. And who's that person? What part of me is that? What part of me gets up after 1 hour's sleep, goes to work, goes to a meeting, goes to an ice bath? Do you know what I mean? Like, and goes to the therapist. Who is that part? Because there's a part of me. There's a lot of parts of me that are self-destructive, But there is a part of me that wants me to be here. There is a part of me that wants to survive. And I never give that part of me enough credit, ever. And it was only in hindsight that I was like, who is that part? Who's like, we're going. You don't want it, we're going. You know what I mean? Like, who's the part that wants me to be well? And how can I get better acquainted with that part? And how can I strengthen that part? Because all these other parts, like, we know for sure, like, they're going to come, they're going to really dominate. They're very dominant parts of me. The punisher, the critic, the bully, like, they're practiced, like, they're parts of me that are so fine, like, they're in my DNA. Like, that's how I've always survived, right? And how do I then get in touch with these other parts of me, you know? And that's kind of the journey I've been on in the last couple of years.
That is such a critical point, is that it's engaging that prefrontal cortex in your rational mind, which has become so diminished by all these thoughts and destructive behaviors that are really governed, as we've said, by fear.
Yeah.
And your amygdala has just gone completely, it's grown to, I mean, they do neuro imaging that shows that people who suffer with anxiety, OCD, addiction, your amygdala can actually physically enlarge, and it does. And so it's not a case of this thing, everyone always talks about nature versus nurture, but there's a neurological issue. So actually, in order to start practicing the behaviors and, as you said, to engage that good side of you, engage the side of you that wants you to be well, that wants you to survive, you've got to keep going.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that you start actually creating neural pathways. And if you don't, you just let those other destructive behaviors sort of take charge. And that's what's so painful and difficult.
It is so painful and difficult. And it's also, it's incredibly terrifying, because it just reminds me of that Florence Welch song, like the things that are killing you are from within, it's all from within. And like, that's what was happening. And I had to become acquainted with what these parts of me were trying to protect me from, because I think, and this is through with a therapist, I don't sit there or recommend you do this work ever on your own, right? Like, but it was that thing of going, what are they trying to tell me? And it was always down to control. Like, I always wanted to control things. I wanted to be in control, even if it was bad or whatever. Like, my desire to control and know an outcome is like the strongest thing in me. Even if that outcome is bad, at least I know it. For me, the scariest thing is the unknown. And part of my disease, part of alcoholism and part of addiction, and there's this really grandiose belief that I know everything. I really, when I'm in a state, like, I really believe that I know everything. I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. I know what I'm like that. Like, I really, and the greatest gift, one of the greatest gifts of this surrender in my 30s is like, I really don't know anything. And I really know now that I don't know anything. You know what I mean? Like, I'll have days where I think I fucking know everything, and I'll tell you, pull up a chair. Like, but the gift of going, oh my God, I don't know anything. It's kind of expansive in a way. It's expansive. It's scary and terrifying, but it feels expansive to me, that like, I now have come to understand that I don't know, and I don't know the best way for me all the time. I actually don't. I can't trust my head a lot of the time. And in order to get back to trusting yourself, you have to first realize that you can't trust what this is saying. I can't bank on it, especially when I'm heightened, especially when I'm, I really understand now that there is a process I need to go through to validate or discredit what I think my next actions should be. And I've had to set up a support network for that. And the more that I rely on that, the better I can get at trusting myself. But first port of call is don't trust it. Don't trust it when heightened, when under pressure, when stressed. Don't trust those thoughts. Don't, console someone else. Go to a meeting. Go, like, you know, really ask for help, ask for fucking help, ask for help. I didn't ask for help for 30 years, really. I didn't really ask for help, not properly. I really thought I had it down, you know.
And I think your support network is so crucial, because something I found, particularly since I've been in Australia, when I'm in the sunshine, my head immediately goes, oh, well, on top of your fairly punitive exercise routine, you've also now got to go for a swim in the ocean every day.
Totally.
And you've also now got to go for, you know, an hour and a half walk in the sunshine. And, oh, well, you know, you can't be taking Ubers everywhere, so you've got to walk. Yeah. And so suddenly you're walking 3 hours a day. You're also going for a swim. And actually, so as you said, I reached out to my therapist and I said, okay, I'm getting a bit manic in my head.
Totally.
And I'm now feeling locked in, because I know that if I do it one day, then it will quickly sort of escalate and I'll have to do it every day.
Right. Yes.
You know, and that's the thing with our habits. It's like, absolutely. You know, once you've given in once, it becomes very, very hard not to. So her response was, well, what would one of your friends do? And I thought, okay, well, I'm not staying by the beach. It takes me, you know, 45 minutes on the bus to get to the beach. That's by the time I finished like a 2.5 hour round trip just to go for a 15-minute swim. So actually, most days it's probably not going to be viable. But on the weekends and maybe on one weekday, when if I can meet a friend there or whatever, it is an option. And so I said maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And so she was like, okay, fine, settle at that. And so I'm determined that I'm going to stick to that, but I don't have my support network here. You know, I don't have people, you know, the time difference makes it very hard. I think, you know, and as you said, we often run away to different locations. We move and we create new friendship groups, you know, all of those things. We're attempting to run away from ourselves, but ultimately, unless you connect with you and you actually are willing to reach out and you're willing to bust that head, because it's, as you said, it's a bully. It's going to try all it can do to get into every door, every caveat, and it will ruin your life if you keep giving in. And so it's just so inspiring, Emily, to hear that, you know, you're managing and you have, like, you've got a life, and that I mean, on the outset, you seem to be really on the upper hand and conquering your demons.
No, yeah, thank you. And likewise, it's that thing, isn't it? Like, and I will say, because again, it's not like, and I shouldn't say that way, like the Navy SEAL that lives in the head, right? Like the Navy SEAL that, like, the moment you open your eyes, it's like, go, 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 go. What are you going to do today? When are you going to exercise? When are you going to go there? What do you got those emails to reply to? Blah, 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 blah. And it goes and it goes and it goes. And you're like, I just want to rest, you know? And that's the truth. We just want rest. We just want peace. We just want peace between here and in here. Like, we just want moments of peace and of presence like that. And I remember thinking in the darkest moments of all my turmoil is like, all these things that I thought mattered don't actually matter. Like, if I could just have a day of being present, I'd chop off my leg. I would chop it off. I would chop it off, because it's that thing is, I would rather break every bone in my body than have this. And I know that's not, and I'm, you know, that's a figure of speech, but that's how you feel. You feel like what you would do to just have some peace. And I remember a really good mate of mine once said to me, it's a quote, and it was, where the room you least want to enter is where your treasure lies, right? And the room I least want to enter always is the one where I'm alone, right? Like, where I'm, like, not just alone, like, I like my own time. It's not that. It's just where I'm deeply unlovable. I'm deeply alone. I'm left with my head. I'm left with the bully. It's just me and the bully and the punisher and the critic and the you're ugly and you're this and you're that. Like, I'm left with that forever and ever and ever, right? And so one of the things in tandem with, you know, and this is the thing about recovering, and I'll always be recovering from my head. Like, that's just life, and that's okay. I've surrendered to that. But you kind of find things along the way, right? Like little tools, you go, that kind of works, like that seems to help, and you start to develop new tools. And one of the things I really didn't like was being alone with my mind without being able to go for the run or do the thing or just like be in action, you know, constantly running. I'm constantly busy. Like, I'm filling up the calendar even though I don't want to. I'm doing things, you know, even though, but I'm just always avoiding being sat with self for too long. And so another practice that really helped me, which I loathed at the beginning, was meditation. I loathed it. I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I went and did a meditation course and everyone was like, oh my God, I'm seeing colors. Like, oh, it's so pretty. And I was like, this is fucked. This is fucked up. I said to them, I was like, this is cooked. Like, is no one hearing screaming thoughts? Is no one terrified? Something is happening. I'm about to have a panic attack. Like, I'm sitting here having to see and listen to this abuse, right? And like, is anyone else like, you know, and granted the meditation teacher, he's amazing, and it wasn't him, you know, he was like, yep, that's what, yep. Okay. So this is the learn. You have to be still and listen. You have to observe. You have to keep going back to, you know. And I remember I was like, again, I was so desperate that I would just do it. But it was so excruciating for 20 minutes twice a day to be sat down with this head. It was really painful. And I would cry and I would sit there and I would be like, you know, how did I become this? Like, I was once this little girl with big dreams. You know, it gets me emotional now. Like, how do we get here? Like, how do you get so hating of this existence? Like, you know, because I remember being a kid and I remember being full of vigor and hope, and it just somehow in this world that we live in, especially this Western world, with the messaging that we get, the confusion that we get, like the patriarchy, like it's hard to be a woman. I'm very privileged and I'm very grateful, but like internally there's a malady, there's a sickness. And so meditation was an amazing resource. It wasn't fun or it wasn't beneficial for about a year. I did that every day. I still do it every day. But it started to change after about a year. Like, things started to, I could recognize the parts. I could see where they were coming from. I could see and hear where it was, you know, just from sitting still with them, which was terrifying. But I went through it. I didn't avoid it. I just was like, this is the worst thing I could do right now would be to listen to my own thoughts. And I was like, well, I guess that's what we're doing. You know what I mean? And I say that. I don't encourage that to people who don't have support around them. I don't encourage that for people who, you know, if someone says don't do that, don't do it. But for me, I was in a place where I was like, I've better the devil, you know, like, let's get to know what is driving this for you. Let's get to know it, you know. So that's also been an amazing companion through my journey and remains to be as well, you know.
I'm curious as to how the OCD is now. I mean, did that start? Yeah. Because I think OCD is definitely something that you can distract yourself from with by engaging in all the addictive behaviors.
Absolutely.
And it can sort of lie a bit sort of more dormant. And then suddenly you put down the food and the exercise and the OCD rears its ugly head, and you find yourself, you know, in your case, it sounds like it's more like checking and counting numbers.
Yeah, it's more numbers. It's also where things are placed, like, and it's so funny because you will get it. You know, you talk to people who don't suffer with these things. They literally, and I just talk about it now too, because I have no shame. Because if I don't talk, if I don't say what I've got, if I don't, like, that's really part of my claiming. Like, and it makes me who I am, right? Like, it really does. Like, so, but mine is very based on like where things have to be, and like I'll put things where they shouldn't be. Like, for example, a laptop bag has to be at the door in a particular thing. Why is the laptop bag at the door? You know, whatever. And there's a gold thing that has to be there, and that, you know, and then the light switch, and I have to think a certain thought before I turn off the light switch. And if I don't have that thought, then the light switch has to go back on. I have to have the thought, right? So there's favorites. There's the greatest hits. They kind of are still around. The light one is probably the one that I still have the most. It's also, you know, that thing when you're in OCD, when you have OCD, you don't know what is just really healthy routine and what's OCD.
I know.
You know, like, it's kind of hard to delineate which is which sometimes. But the more obvious ones, like certain clothes that I have to wear or certain things that I kind of hear it now and I try and catch myself and go, ooh, we're doing the thing. Like you wanted to wear that or now you have to do certain things to get that. And I try and like sit with it, give it love, give it love, give it love, and then do the opposite.
Yeah.
Give it love, do the opposite. And the way I kind of get when I was younger and I tried to, because, I ended up with OCD that I'd have to blink 23 times before it started to take over everything. And I remember having the thought that I'm doing this because if I don't do this, something bad will happen, right? Like I won't get the thing, I won't be loved, something will happen. I'm in control. If I blink, everything will be safe. And I remember thinking one day, if you blink, something bad will happen. If you follow the impulse, something bad will happen.
Yeah.
So I did that kind of naturally as a teenager, which was it made my brain go, what? Do we do it? Do we do it? Do we not do it? And in that pause was my life. Do you know what I mean? Like in that schism of like, do we? And then I would maybe do it again, but then it eventually just got less because I kept going, yeah, but if you do it, Emily, if you follow what it's telling you, then the bad thing will happen. Then the bad thing will happen. And I really that's how, without therapy when I was younger, kind of got a bit more balanced with it. But it's interesting. I don't, like I'm going away to India tomorrow and like it's weird, like packing becomes a really big thing. And my friends are always like, what is going on? And it's my OCD. It's like I'm the thought of having to pack a bag and I'm going away for 2 weeks to a place I've never been. It's really hard. It's really hard because my things and my, like, it's all messed up. My OCD is all part of that fear. Like it's around, like, and I've accepted that it's around and I know it and it's not dangerous, like I'm not dangerous. I don't think that of myself anymore. Like that deep thing, I don't think that. So sometimes it flares up. I'm like, oh, I'm doing that thing and I can kind of have a laugh and whatever, or I'm in the thick of it. But like, I'm sure that, with pain that comes in my life, that it naturally does fling up again, and then I can kind of recognize it. It's just a process, but yeah, it's when things are going well, the OCD will be really high, and when things are going bad, because I want to keep the good and reject the bad. So it's just noticing now. Like I think that's also been a big thing. It's just, can I just notice? And I'm going to be doing the thing, but can I notice and can I be curious? Can I notice and be curious, and sometimes that works. Like the laptop bag's not there. It moved. I moved it. What? That was huge for me. It's not there.
Yeah, and it's amazing over time how those ones that were once huge, as you get better, you're suddenly like, actually, we need to look back because that was such a thing for a long, long time. And I think so often we can get so consumed and weighed down by what's still going on. And actually, you really need to look down the mountain and see how far you've climbed.
Yeah.
Because that in itself is just another tactic for the bully to get in there and to say you've made no progress.
That's
and
right.
Actually you really do, because the OCD I'm a believer that OCD takes a long, long time, whether one ever gets over it.
I don't know if it's
I
think you're always in recovery,
slog.
right?
Yeah. But you've got to give yourself credit where credit's due.
Absolutely.
And actually it's like, wow, you managed to pack that suitcase and it took you 2 hours instead of 8 hours.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean?
That's right.
That's huge progress, and you've got to cling on to those victories.
And we never give ourselves enough credit, right? Like that's true. That's so true. I'm so not allergic. I'm so unpracticed in that. I am getting better. Like I am getting better at recognizing and congratulating and allowing myself to sit in going, well done, mate. Well done, babe. Like you did that. You moved that laptop bag. And I'll tell people, I'm like, I moved the laptop bag. And people who are close with me will be like, good job. Like,
Yeah.
But it's those things. I'm like, that's one less thing and maybe that'll appear somewhere else at some point, but like nothing bad happened. And when something bad happens, my brain doesn't then go, oh, well, it was associated with you changing something. I have more of an understanding about that now. And it just feels a tiny bit looser.
Yeah, I agree. And I describe it as it's like ivory kind of encasing an ivory. encasing your brain, and it's so rigid, and actually you just so you manage to cut the stems, and as you cut more and more, it just starts to loosen its grip.
Absolutely.
And it's it's like a real parasite that's sort of consuming your brain. But
it is, isn't it?
It will loosen the more, as you said, the more you employ that opposite action, or you just have that awareness that you've got to go right every time it wants to go left. And
yeah, action. It's like take opposite action and understanding will come later. Like that's always really interesting. Like when the Navy SEAL goes, you're going to like on a Sunday, like this, go to the ba. I go, and we're staying in bed and reading a book. And my brain will bully me. Like it's like, get up, and I go, no, I'm back to the book. No, it's okay, back to the book. It's literally training the opposite.
Yeah, it's like dealing with a child.
It's well, because it is a child. Yeah. It is a child. And that's sort of realization I had recently too. It's like this part of me, I had a really good day, a really amazing day. I was going to see some theatre with an actress that I loved, and I had my friend with me. I had this amazing day. I'm sat in the theatre and I went, oh my God. And I noticed that I was like, today's been amazing. And then the next thought was, don't have it if you don't sleep. Don't remember when you didn't sleep. And I was like, oh my goodness, wow. Like you got like, because I'm so high, like when things are good, that's when I'm almost again most fearful, because I've got something to lose, And I went home and I did some writing on it. And I recognized that voice is just the child. It's just the inner child who has been shocked, grew up with some trauma and thought things were good and then got shocked very young, And so there's an association when things are good to be super aware, to be super hypervigilant. And that's all it was. And the voice, that part of me sounds like a demon that's coming to kind of like the Black Plague is coming in. Do you know what I mean? But really that's just a little girl who's like, just beware, we hate surprises. Just beware. Like that's all she's trying, and she's dressed up as something. Do you know, is this sounding so hippy dippy?
No, I mean, not at all.
It's like, it really is just like a young voice that has been developed to seem like this really big, scary thing that's going to take over my whole being, because now I'm going to go mad again because I'm having a good time, right? But it's just a little girl who doesn't like to be shocked.
Yeah, and who's terrified. And I think the inner child work is so important, because you do realize, as you said, it's that childhood trauma that has basically dictated your behavior up until, and it still does.
Yes.
Because as you say, when anything good happens, you're expecting it to end. So like you, Sundays I try and have like a more chilled rest day, but then I'll dread the whole day I'll spend fighting that voice, as you say, the Navy SEAL, who's telling me you just fucking get up and go, just go. And unless I have someone there who is going to act as that buffer between me and the Navy SEAL, I'm still at the point where I can't give myself permission alone to rest.
Yeah, of course.
So I have to reach out to that person. But then, of course, the codependency kicks in, and then that person flakes, and then you're like, and then you unfortunately tend to then...
Yes, and then it becomes a whole
back to the whole I
totally get that.
But I then totally get to the point where I'm dreading Monday all of Sunday, because that Navy SEAL is going to get in any way it can. So it's like, but you're going to start the punitive regime again tomorrow. So this is just a countdown. It's just a countdown. So just you can't be joyous in this moment. And as you said, it will try and sabotage any moment of joy that you have or experience.
Absolutely. And it's wild, isn't it? But isn't it wonderful that we're not alone?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, because also part of having brains like this is it makes you feel like no one else would ever understand. Like you are terminally fucked. Like this is, like it really makes you believe that you are the most crazy. You are the most, and it's, when I can talk to people who have the same thing, I go, oh my God, thank God, thank God. And also then you can help other people. Like this is what you're doing, right? Like this is part of your service, like you're helping people like who will listen to this and go, fuck me too, you know? And there's such power in that. There's such power in that because collectively, you know, the more we tell the truth, collectively that we can speak more about these parts of ourselves. I think there is a healing that takes place. On a, you know, you've got to do the work, but on some sort of level, like on a molecular level, there's a healing that takes place to know that like you're not alone with these Navy SEALs.
Yeah, and as you said, we tend to isolate when times are really bad.
Absolutely.
And actually, that's the worst thing you can do because, I mean, I've had to spend a lot of time alone the last sort of 10 days while I've been settling in here.
Yeah.
And I don't know a lot of people. And immediately, I feel like I'm going crazy. I'm like, oh my God, Pandora, you're such a failure in life. All the rumination just goes on to overdrive. And then you're living in a cycle of shame. So you're like, well, no one's going to want to see me anyway because I'm just a victim of this and I'm just boring. And suddenly you find yourself being like, what am I doing? And you then get depressed and then you're like, oh my God, I kind of had this vision that I was going to be really happy and I was going to do all these things that were going to really push my boundaries and I was going to be a new person. And of course, that's not within your capability. Like you've got to manage those expectations. It's like, you weren't going to travel to the other side of the world and suddenly for all your behaviors just to dissolve.
Totally.
You know, you've got to give yourself realistic targets and you'll get there.
Yeah.
And next time you come back to Australia, it'll be slightly better. And then the next time and the next time, and you know, and you've got to, the last time I was here was 10 years ago. And I keep reminding myself, I keep saying, okay, look how far you've come. And then of course the Navy SEAL comes in. Oh, well, no, you haven't.
Yeah. Of course.
But you've got to get there. And have your relationships improved? I mean, I know you had a tricky relationship with your mum when you were in the height of your addiction. And
yes,
you said, you mentioned your cousin.
Yeah. And I mean, generally that was, they were all very worried and they copped a lot of my pain. Because hurt people, right? A lot of the time if they're not aware of it. My relationships have improved so much and a lot. And there's been, you know, I've been really fortunate. Like I've had a lot of good relationships in terms of friendships. I've had friends for a long time, like 20 years, 25 years, you know, I've been really lucky. But what I will say is the way who I choose now to let into my circle has shifted and who I want to spend time with. I kind of always wanted to spend time with the cool person or like you know, and I genuinely like have like that has shifted. I think that's just part of getting older too, but my relationships have improved. I've been, you know, part of my program and part of my recovery is to be rigorously honest, like as honest as I can be. And that's really hard. That's really, really hard. But when that starts happening, things naturally shift and different energies are brought into your life and other energies leave your life, you know, and that's okay, you know. So yeah, my relationship, you know, my mom is the most loving and my family and my cousins are the most forgiving and everyone sees, you know, that I have something that is a disease that I have to kind of, and that's the thing too with addiction and stuff. Like for so many years, like addiction, it's the only disease that'll tell you don't have a disease. You know what I mean? It's the only one that will be like, nah, you don't have that, you know. And now that that's been realized, because now I definitely know, but there are still days, there are still times when I go, are you an alcoholic? You know, you haven't had it. Come. But those thoughts pass through. They pass through, you know, like it's just, you know, but I think, yeah, being able to, and always I really try now too to come back to gratitude. Like you said, I think it's so true that we're hard, like if our baseline is whatever, our baseline is being hard on ourselves. But coming back to gratitude's a big thing, noticing how far I've come, even on the days when the parts of me will say like, you've made zero progress. Look at me, I'm still here, you're still listening. You know what I mean? But there has been significant amount of like I can sleep. What? I can sleep for 8 hours. Like that is like a miracle to me. With nothing, just sleep. And I always come back to that. I'm like, it's the basic things that I'm grateful for. It's the basic. I had, I remember I'd be like, I had 1 minute of full presence today with someone. 1 minute.
Yeah. And it's the tiny victories.
It's amazing because now I can have like an hour.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And it grows. And you're like, on Sunday I managed to have an ice cream with my friend and not binge.
Oh, good, honey.
And to not purge and to not then beat myself up the next. I couldn't have imagined doing that even a year ago.
Yeah, sure.
It would have been like 4 tubs later and, purging and then exercising for the next week to sort of negate the calorific. I mean, honestly, it seems so tiny and so trivial, and your mind will try and convince you that you want to binge, and that's what I'm grappling with at the moment. Is a lot of that, like,
yeah, of course,
yeah,
of course.
Anyway, the inner tug of war, as it were. But you've just got to drop the rope and be like, you know what? I'm not fighting with you. I'm just gonna try and show up and be normal. And I think particularly with the food, doing those, as I call them, exposures with a friend or with someone who's like loving, can just keep you safe. And for the early bit,
totally.
I think that's the advice that I give girls who sometimes say, well, should I just avoid those foods that really trigger me? Should I avoid them entirely? And maybe for a while you need to, but I'm a believer that it's quite nice to know and that you can actually have a bit of anything. And it might, the majority of the time you might avoid those foods, but just occasionally it's nice to know that you can indulge without going over completely AWOL. And
yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool that you had that.
Thanks, What time are we at?
But just over an hour.
Okay.
It's about 4:20.
Oh shit, he's here. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Do we have one more question?
Yeah. So, I'd love to ask you one final question, which is, what advice would you like to give listeners who are in the midst of OCD, food addiction, alcoholism, and they know that they've got a problem, but they just can't see a way out?
My biggest advice would be, and it's really hard, but it would be ask for help. The bravest thing, the most courageous thing you can ever do is ask for help. And if you ask it in your mind first, ask it out, and then slowly over time, I do believe things will come your way. Ask someone for help. There are so many services. There are so many places that you can start, they're a phone call away. There are things out there that are free of charge. And if you're really in the height of it, there is absolutely no shame. The healthiest thing you can ever do is ask for help. I don't see that as a failure. And I think our society will say that. It will tell you that if you need help or there's something wrong with you, there's such shame attached to it. Like, oh, there's something, it's the healthiest thing you can ever do for your life. And ask for help. Try and be honest with those around you, and and just know that there are other ways. There are other ways to deal with it, and there are other, and it takes time. But my biggest advice would be ask for help.
It's been such a joy to talk to you.
You too, Pandora.
I could talk to you for hours, but hopefully this will be the first of many
exactly. In Australia. Yes.
Exactly. And thank you so much for taking the time to come to the studio today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
Pleasure.